this session, we're going to cover the tools you have available to you in order to compare and contrast two or more variants, or maybe a variant against its original raw file. And we're also going to touch on the brand new feature of the before and after tool that was introduced in May 2020 into Capture One. So before we go into the new version of the tool, or the new feature, I'm actually going to make sure we cover the traditional way of doing this, because there are still scenarios where the traditional way is still the best tool for showing the differences between two images, and hopefully at the end of this session that'll make sense. So the first thing we've got to do is be able to see more than one picture at a time. So I need to select more than one picture, which means I need my browser. So my browser is accessed by going to View and then Browser. So if your browser is missing, that's where you'll find it. Or you can press Command B on a Mac or Control B on a Windows machine, and up will pop your browser of images in your catalog or session. The second thing that we can do, if we want to, is we can customize that browser. So we can place it below our pictures if we want to. But in this case, I'm going to leave it as on the right, so place right. And you can also auto hide if you want to, and change some of the thumbnail size. For the purposes of today, so that you can see what we're doing very clearly, we're going to leave that up on the right hand side nice and big. So the first thing the browser, if you have a look, is the image that's been selected has got a nice strong bold white line around it, and the other images don't. If I want to see more than one picture on the screen in this viewer, then all I've got to do is hold down the Command key on Mac or Control key on Windows and choose the other images I want to see. So there's my second image, there's my third image, there's my fourth. I could keep going, but if I want to remove one, all I do is hold down that same Command or Control key and just click it again, and it disappears out of the selection. So I could undo this one, I could get rid of this one. So we're back to two images. Now it still tells me which one I'm actively working on with this bold white line, and that bold white line will match the one that's in the viewer for the image here. So if I click on this image, now we have the bold white line around this picture. This is the raw image. This is the adjusted image. The raw image has a couple of issues. So number one, we didn't use a graduated filter when we should have done. So we've put one in software just to pull out some more detail in the sky. But also the horizon was wrong. So we've straightened it as well. And the crop is different. So the crop on this one is 4:3. The crop on the final version was 3:2. So there's some substantial differences between the left and the right. And they're quite obvious there. But sometimes we want to have a little bit closer look at what's going on. Bear in mind the first thing, the image that is identified with the nice strong white line around it is the image you're actively working on. Now, even though we've got more than one image selected, we're still only working on one active image at a time. So for example, if I pull down our exposure in our raw file, it does on the raw, but it hasn't affected this variant, even though the variant was also selected. And that would apply for if I had all of these selected, and I chose to increase brightness and exposure, it's only going to do it on the image which is active. The active image denoted by the thick white line around the picture. Let's just reset those images or those adjustments on the raw, and let's get back to our raw file. There, hold down the Command or Control key, and I've got my second file. So let's imagine I want to zoom into our ice block here. So let's choose the magnifying glass up in the tool, or press the Z or Z key for Americans, and let's zoom in on our ice block. So instantly it's gone active on the one that I was zooming in on, but this is a problem, isn't it? It's only zooming in on the one picture, and as I move around, so hold down the space bar, I get my hand tool, or click on the hand icon up here, it's only moving around on one. That's not a very good before and after, really. So what's going on? Well, the reason is I haven't told Capture One that I want to link the behavior between this image and this image as I do it. The way that we link them is by holding the Shift key down. So if I go back to that same magnifier and now click here, but with the Shift key held down on my keyboard as I'm clicking, it now links my zooming on the right hand image to my zooming on the left. And then we come into our second challenge, which is, how come they're in different places if I was zooming in together? Well, let's go back to what I said earlier. These pictures have been straightened and cropped differently. So the pixel position that I zoomed in on the right-hand side is correct on the left-hand side, but what's happened is the content of that image has shifted. So this is where using independent movement is actually very handy, because if I hold down the space bar or press the hand icon up here in my tool set, and I don't hold the Shift key down, now I could choose to move this image independently of this one. So independently, I can say, actually, let's line these two ice blocks up together Let's say roughly there, maybe, something about that. Now if I hold the Shift key down with my magnifying tool, the two move together, but to roughly the same point. Now, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but there we go. So I can now zoom in and out of both images to the same equivalent point, or I can move them independently. So if I hold down just the spacebar and move, I move independently. If I hold down the spacebar and the Shift key together and then move, I move in sync with the image on the left. So there are reasons why we might want our before and after to allow us to move things around a little bit. Let's take, for example, the horizon. On this one on the left, we've got quite a diagonal here on the horizon. On this one on the right, we don't. So if I was doing a before and after, that's going to look really weird if I just do a split screen at that point. So in this case, I actually quite like the fact that I can move them together, or I can move them independently if I want. So let's pull up two completely different variants. So these two are the same picture, but in different variant forms. So let's just zoom that one out to fit and zoom that one out to fit. Now, because the crop on these is the same, if I zoom in to this area here, with our Shift key held down, we will get to exactly the same point in the picture. And then if I hold down the space bar or press the hand icon up in the tool set and hold down the Shift key, as I'm moving around, I'm in exactly the same position on both pictures. And I can also do this for more than one image. So more than two images. I can pick up all four if I want, hold down the Shift key, and as I move around, they're all moving around together. So this is a great way of comparing two or more different images. You can move around and you can zoom in isolation in each image, or you can make sure that they're synced up and synchronized and working together as you move around and pan around the image. So what about the new tool from Capture One? Well, let's load up our variant. So this one here. Now, if I now click on this before button up here, I've got two modes that I can apply to looking at before and after. The first mode is effectively called full view. The second mode is the split view slider, which is what a lot of people are more familiar with. So in full view, I can go to before, or I can go to after. Now what you'll notice is Capture One's been very clever, because do you remember on this image here, the crop was different and the angle was different because of the straightening tool. So what Capture One has done to not confuse things is it's taken my variant and it's applied any crop, keystone or straightening to make sure that we're looking like for like at the same portal of the image against the raw data that's behind this variant. So I don't have to pull up both on the same screen at the same time. I can just choose this one and click on there to see before and there to see after. For those that want a quicker way of doing it, press the Y key on your keyboard, before, and after. If you get stuck under before and after mode, you've got here this little Y that'll tell you the keyboard shortcut just above the choice of modes that you want to run in. So there's our before, there's our after, but here's our before with the crop and straightening and everything corrected to match our variant that was the after. Now that's mode number one. Mode number two, if I hold down the button up here, or if I were to go to view before and after mode and change it to split view slider, we now have a very cool slider that can be positioned to anywhere we want on the screen. So I can literally see before and after, again, aligned to the variant's crop and everything like that. So we haven't got this mismatch that would happen if we did the before raw, pure raw, to the after variant. So it's aligned everything so we can see exactly what we're doing to the image, not necessarily the crop scenario that we've chosen. But with this slider, I can also actively edit. So if I, for instance, wanted to put a new layer, so let's put a new adjustment layer. And on this layer, I'm going to choose to bring my exposure down and the saturation up. Let's choose a brush. I can brush, and that brush has applied to the before, to the after image, and we can still see what was going to happen with the before. I can undo. Great. Now here's something even more cool. Let's go to another picture at the same time. So we've talked about having two pictures that are very similar loaded up at the same time onto the screen. So even without the before and after tool, I could always go for this one and this one. Well, let's look at another before and after. So let's go to this one and this one. So that's a after image, sorry, that's the variant that's been changed of this raw. And this was the before, I've gone around the wrong way, of this variant, which was the final version of this raw. But in order to do that and to see two different images on the screen, the before and after, I've had to actually pull up 4 different pictures. Well, in the new before and after tool, I don't. I can choose this picture and this picture. These are both variants, both completely different crops. And if I now choose the before and after tool, the split, I can see the same before and after effect on more than one picture at the same time. We can even go more than 2 images. We can just keep on going. So in each case, the image is still fully editable. Remember, you are editing the image, which has the white border around it. But with the new before and after tool, we're able to see the variant versus its original raw that has been aligned to match the crop and straightening angle of your variant. So this is where we'll now go back to the traditional method, because this is a great way of being able to see the difference between the pure raw file that you brought into Capture One and your variant. If you want to see the difference between 2 variants, you still need to use the traditional method, which is, let go of this, I'm going to turn off my before and after, choose this variant, hold down the Command or Control key in Windows, and choose this variant. I can now see these side by side. Remember, using the zoom tool, hold down the Shift key, and they move in unison together to the same point. I can press the hand tool or press the spacebar on the keyboard, and again, holding down the Shift key, I can move them together simultaneously. If I let go of the Shift key, I move them independently of each other. So hopefully that makes sense. If there are any questions, do feel free to put them down in the comments. We can always try and cover off any challenges that you guys are having. But 2 very different ways of seeing a before and after. And obviously the new tool is going to excite quite a lot of people, but it's a very different approach. It's a way of seeing the raw data versus your variant, whereas the traditional method of seeing more than one image on the screen still stands for where you want to compare 2 or more variants against each other.